He expected tears, maybe a fight, but when Elara found the evidence of his betrayal, she simply smiled. That serene smile was the first sign his meticulously built life was about to be methodically, coldly undone. Elara Vance's serene smile lingered, a delicate curve that never quite reached her eyes. The silk shirt, flung carelessly over the valet stand, bore a vibrant cherry-red smudge, a splash of rebellion against the pristine white. Marcus Thorne, her husband of 10 years, was in the shower, his off-key baritone echoing through the marble bathroom. He thought he was home free. He thought he was clever. Elara picked up the shirt, her fingers tracing the stain. It wasn't her shade. Her lip gloss was a muted rose, discreet, professional. This, however, screamed of an entirely different kind of woman, bolder, perhaps less concerned with subtlety. She knew the type. Marcus, bless his predictable heart, had always been drawn to the flamboyant. Elara smiled, her most dazzling, saccharine smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, just admiring how much you've been working lately. This lipstick. It's so vibrant. Not mine, is it, darling?" She held up the shirt, the crimson mark blazing between them like a scarlet letter. Her voice remained even, almost conversational. The calm was eerie. Marcus's face, usually so composed, flushed a deep red. "What? Lipstick? Nonsense, Elara. Must be a client meeting. You know how these networking events are. People get a little exuberant." He chuckled, a brittle, unconvincing sound. "And that's not my phone. Must be a colleague's. I picked up the wrong one by mistake. Happens all the time." He gestured vaguely towards the nightstand, where his actual phone sat, charging. The gaslight, predictable, and entirely ineffective. Elara tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. "A colleague's phone with messages about round 2? Stud? And how my husband's bore of a wife has no idea." She recited the lines with perfect recall, her voice sweet as poison. Her eyes were chips of ice, reflecting Marcus's rapidly paling face. He stammered, his usual eloquence deserting him. "Elara, you're overreacting. It's a misunderstanding. You know how jealous you can be. Always reading into things." He tried to snatch the phone, but she deftly pulled it back, her movements fluid and precise. His entitled anger, always simmering beneath the surface of his charm, began to bubble up. "Give me that. You have no right to snoop through my things." "No right?" Elara's smile tightened. "When your things are quite literally broadcasting your indiscretions into our marital bed, I believe I have every right to listen." She placed the phone gently on the bedside table, then walked to the closet, pulling out a fresh shirt for him. "Don't worry, dear. We'll talk about this later." Her tone promised something far more chilling than a mere discussion. Promised and reckoning. Later, as Marcus dressed in silence, avoiding her gaze, Elara moved through their expansive home, preparing Anya's breakfast. Her daughter, a whirlwind of morning energy, bounded into the kitchen, her princess backpack clutched tightly. "Morning, Mommy. Can we have pancakes today?" Elara knelt, adjusting Anya's backpack strap. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything for my princess." She kissed Anya's forehead, her touch gentle, unwavering. Her daughter's innocent face was the anchor, the immutable truth in a world suddenly revealed as a meticulously crafted lie. Everything she did from this moment on would be for Anya. Marcus had not only betrayed Elara, he had threatened the very foundation of their daughter's stability. That, Elara knew with chilling clarity, was unforgivable. While Marcus left for work, a carefully constructed excuse about an early meeting on his lips, Elara made a mental checklist. The burner phone, she noted, was still on the bedside table, conveniently forgotten. She would start there. The name LS would be the key. Lyra Sterling. She'd heard that name whispered in the periphery of Marcus's business circles. A rising star in digital marketing, remarkably young, remarkably ambitious, and now remarkably entangled. Elara brewed herself a cup of her specialty jasmine tea, the fragrant steam rising around her, a calming illusion. Her hands, usually graceful, moved with a newfound purpose as she opened her laptop. Her professional network was vast, far-reaching, and discreet. Marcus, in his arrogance, had always dismissed her tea business as a charming hobby, a domestic trifle. He never understood the quiet power she wielded, the information she could access, the alliances she had forged. He never understood that the woman he called his wife, the one he now so carelessly betrayed, was a strategist, a meticulous architect. And he, with his lipstick-stained shirts and burner phones, had just handed her the blueprints to his own destruction. The game had begun, and Marcus, with his weak will and flimsy lies, had no idea he was already losing. She would be his undoing, piece by calculated piece, all under the guise of a caring wife merely seeking to understand. The aroma of freshly brewed Darjeeling, Marcus's favorite, filled the air, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Elara's precise mind. She sat opposite him at the gleaming mahogany dining table, her posture impeccable, a faint smile playing on her lips as he poured himself a second cup. Anya was safely at her grandmother's, a detail Elara had meticulously arranged. "You've been working late, darling," Elara began, her voice smooth as silk, yet with an almost imperceptible edge. Her gaze, however, was fixed on the intricate pattern of the antique teacup in her hands, not on his face. Marcus chuckled, a forced sound that grated on Elara's nerves. "Yes, the sterling deal is more complex than anticipated. Long hours, endless negotiations." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers, a gesture she found increasingly repulsive. "But it'll be worth it for us, for Anya." Elara gently withdrew her hand, feigning a need to adjust her napkin. "Ah, the sterling deal. Interesting. Tell me, Marcus, does the sterling deal have a penchant for leaving strawberry-scented lipstick marks on your collar?" Marcus froze, his teacup halfway to his lips. The easy smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic in his eyes. What are you talking about, Elara?" His voice was a shade too loud, a beat too quick. "Oh, you know." She finally lifted her gaze, her eyes, usually warm and placid, now held a cool, unwavering glint. "That faint, yet distinct, shade of cherry red I found on your shirt collar last night. Not my shade, is it? I prefer plum. And certainly not the designer brand I saw in your messages." He stammered, putting the cup down with a clatter. That's ridiculous. It must have been a client." A clumsy handshake. "Someone brushed past me." He fumbled for his phone, as if to prove a point, but Elara's next words stopped him. "And the messages, Marcus?" Her voice remained eerily calm, each word a perfectly placed dart. "The ones from Lyra S. The miss you, darling, at 2 a.m.? The can't wait for our next clandestine meeting last Tuesday? Your phone, which you so carelessly left unlocked on the bedside table, was quite chatty this morning." "Oh, Marcus, please." Elara sighed, a theatrical display of weariness. "Do you truly believe me to be so naive, so blind? While you were out working late on your sterling deal, I was busy connecting the dots. Lyra Sterling, a charming young woman with an Instagram full of luxury vacations and a bank account that doesn't quite match her declared income. A woman whose name appears on several shell companies connected to your recent investment in the new acquisition. Tell me, is her name also on your company's payroll? Or is that a separate, more personal arrangement?" His carefully constructed world was not just cracking. It was shattering around him, each piece reflecting Elara's cold, hard truth. He tried to interrupt, to deny, but the words wouldn't form. "Don't worry, Marcus. I have copies of everything." She smiled, a chilling, triumphant curve of her lips. "The messages, the photos, the video, even the financial transfers you've been making to her consulting firm. All neatly cataloged. You see, while you were busy being human, I was busy being thorough." She took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, allowing the silence to stretch, thick with his mounting panic. "So, now that we've cleared the air on your suffocation and my perfection, let's discuss the next steps." She placed her teacup down with a delicate click that echoed ominously in the room. I want a divorce, and I want full custody of Anya. As for the financial arrangements, let's just say I've been doing some calculations. I've outlined everything in this document. From a pristine leather folder beside her, Elara produced a stack of papers, bound neatly, and slid them across the table. The top page read, in bold, stark letters, Divorce Settlement Proposal Elara Vance v. Marcus Thorne. Marcus stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. His face was a mask of utter disbelief, then dawning horror. This wasn't a wife begging for explanations. This was an architect of ruin, calmly presenting his blueprint. His perfectly imperfect life was about to be meticulously disassembled, and she, his too perfect wife, held the hammer. The scent of Darjeeling and jasmine, usually a balm, felt like a premonition of conflict as Elara Vance's assistant discreetly buzzed her intercom. Ms. Vance, there's a visitor for you, a Ms. Sterling. She insists it's urgent. Elara's gaze didn't falter from the complex tea-leaf pattern she was analyzing. Show her in, please, into the main reception area, and prepare a pot of our Zenith Serenity blend. It might be needed. Her voice remained as smooth as polished jade, betraying none of the internal calculation that instantly ignited. Lyra Sterling. The brazenness was precisely what she'd anticipated. Lyra swept into the reception, a vibrant splash of emerald green amidst the elegant, muted tones of Elara's office. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too bright, her posture a little too confident for someone about to face the woman whose life she'd systematically dismantled. Elara Vance, I presume? Lyra's voice was sugary, laced with a triumphant undertone. Marcus has told me so much about you. It's a shame we never formally met, given how intertwined our lives have become. She sat uninvited, crossing her legs, a designer bag prominently displayed. He said you were quite the homemaker. I, on the other hand, prefer to live a little. Elara entered, her simple charcoal suit a stark contrast to Lyra's flamboyant ensemble. She moved with a quiet grace, her expression unreadable. Indeed, Miss Sterling. And I, too, have learned quite a bit about you. Elara gestured to the tea service. Zenith Serenity, a blend I often recommend for calming frayed nerves. Lyra scoffed, waving away the offer. Oh, I'm perfectly calm. Ecstatic, actually. Marcus is finally seeing things clearly. He's tired of living under a microscope, of being judged by your perfection. He wants passion, adventure, things you clearly can't provide. Her eyes, sharp and predatory, raked over Elara. He's leaving you, you know, for me, and we're going to build a beautiful life together. A life you clearly couldn't give him. Elara settled into the armchair opposite, her hands clasped loosely in her lap. Is that so, Miss Sterling? And what exactly does this beautiful life entail? Another lavish apartment, perhaps? More designer bags financed by someone else's assets. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Because from what I understand, your current financial situation, shall we say, isn't quite as beautiful as your outward presentation suggests. The default notices from your previous landlord, the outstanding balances on multiple credit cards, not to mention the personal loan from that rather unsavory character, Mr. Chun. All quite a departure from the heiress narrative you've been spinning for Marcus. Wouldn't you agree? Marcus, it seems, has been far too preoccupied to notice the finer details of your entrepreneurial spirit. Elara continued unperturbed. Nor, I imagine, would he appreciate the full scope of your personal medical history, particularly a certain diagnosis that, for the sake of discretion, we'll simply refer to as human papillomavirus. The words landed like a physical blow. Lyra recoiled, her face draining of color. Her jaw hung slightly agape, the carefully constructed facade shattering completely. How dare you? You have no right to. I have every right, Elara interjected, her gaze unwavering. As Marcus's wife, I have every right to protect my family's assets, my daughter's future, and indeed, his health from malicious exploitation. And as an individual, I have every right to expose the truth when someone attempts to build their empire on lies and deceit. Elara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet it resonated with an undeniable power. Consider any transfers Marcus made to you null and void. We're already working with our legal team to claw back every penny, every luxury item, every advantage you've deceptively acquired. Furthermore, Miss Sterling, given your history of financial misconduct and your blatant interference in a legal marriage, be prepared for a series of very unwelcome legal notices. Defamation, extortion, tortious interference. My lawyers are quite thorough. Lyra was shaking, her emerald dress suddenly looking cheap and gaudy. The carefully cultivated image of the glamorous mistress had dissolved into a panicked, cornered animal. Her eyes darted around the elegant room, as if seeking an escape from the calm, intellectual predator before her. You won't get away with this. Lyra finally spat, her voice a desperate hiss. Marcus loves me. He'll never let you ruin my life. Elara merely smiled, a cold, serene expression that sent a chill down Lyra's spine. He may love you, Miss Sterling, but he also loves his reputation, his company, and his freedom. And when he realizes the true cost of your reckless ambition, I assure you, love will be the last thing on his mind. The bill, it seems, has just arrived, and I intend to make sure you pay every cent. She rose, signaling the conversation was over. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to attend to. Unlike some, I build my success on genuine effort, not on the broken promises of others. The door clicked shut behind Elara, silencing the lingering echoes of her dismissal. Outside, the city hummed with its usual indifferent rhythm, a stark contrast to the quiet tempest she had just left in her wake. She didn't look back, her heels clicking purposefully down the polished hallway. There was no triumph etched on her face, only a serene focus, like a surgeon preparing for a complex, inevitable operation. The previous skirmishes, the small, petty victories against Lyra and Marcus, were merely preamble. The real work was about to begin. Marcus, however, was far from serene. The words, broken promises of others, had struck a raw nerve, not because he cared for the promises themselves, but because he sensed a shift in the tectonic plates beneath his carefully constructed world. He paced his office, the financial news channels a muted, ominous backdrop. Analysts murmured about market instability, dubious offshore investments, and unprecedented liquidity challenges facing Thorne Industries. The specific company names were always just out of focus, just beyond the headlines, but the whispers had started. Lyra's latest, grandest scheme, a multimillion-dollar green energy initiative backed by a consortium of shadowy foreign investors, was now under intense scrutiny. It wasn't just collapsing, it was imploding, threatening to drag Thorne Industries down with it. He snatched up his phone, his fingers fumbling as he tried to dial Lyra. No answer. Again. A cold dread seeped into his bones. He knew Lyra was a wild card, a dazzling but unstable element. He'd reveled in her reckless abandon, mistaking it for passion, for power. Now that same recklessness was a noose tightening around his neck. The calls from his board members had escalated from concerned to outright hostile. His once loyal lieutenants now eyed him with thinly veiled suspicion. His empire, built on a foundation of charm, ambition, and a healthy dose of Elara's quiet, steadfast support, was wobbling. Desperate, he tried Elara's number. It rang once, twice, then clicked to voicemail. Elara, he began, his voice surprisingly shaky, devoid of its usual patronizing confidence. Look, I know things are complicated, but Thorne Industries, it's in trouble. Real trouble. This Lyra situation, it's spiraling. I need your advice, your help. You always had a way with these things. The books, the legal stuff. He trailed off, aware of how pathetic he sounded. He, Marcus Thorne, reduced to begging his estranged wife for a lifeline. The irony, bitter and sharp, cut him. Elara listened to the voicemail later, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. She was in her study, surrounded by ledgers and legal documents, a delicate jasmine tea steaming beside her. Her meticulously assembled team, a discreet network of forensic accountants, cybersecurity experts, and legal strategists, had been working tirelessly. They had not merely uncovered Lyra's fraudulent connections. They had painstakingly mapped the entire web of deceit, ensuring that when it unraveled, it would do so with maximum catastrophic impact, directly implicating Marcus. Every suspicious transaction, every laundered penny, every shell company, it was all laid bare. She pressed delete on Marcus's voicemail. Her focus was on the next domino. Through a highly placed, discreet source, Elara received a sealed medical report. It detailed a recent positive diagnosis for gonorrhea. Marcus's name clear as day. The report also subtly hinted at a pattern of unprotected encounters, a reckless disregard for his own health, and by extension, hers and Anya's. She remembered his dismissive coughs, his feigned fatigue, the way he'd brushed off her concerns about his stress-induced malaise. He was not merely unfaithful. He was diseased, and his deception had put her and their daughter at risk. The disgust, though contained, was a cold fire in her stomach. This wasn't just about money or betrayal anymore. It was about the insidious rot he had introduced into their lives. Just as the news of Thorne Industries' impending collapse began to leak beyond the financial pages, Elara arranged a meeting with Marcus. Not at her home, nor his office, but at a neutral, upscale private dining room, a place where discreet conversations could unfold without prying ears. Marcus arrived, looking noticeably haggard, his usually immaculate suit now slightly rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. The swagger was gone, replaced by a desperate, almost pleading posture. He had expected a confrontation, an argument, perhaps a chance to appeal to her latent compassion. He found only a wall of impenetrable calm. "Elara, you have to help me," he started, before she even sat down. "Lyra, she's a viper. Everything she touched has turned to ash. The company, it's going under. My legacy, our future, it's all at risk." He even dared to bring Anya into it, a desperate last-ditch appeal. "Think of Anya. If Thorne Industries collapses, what will become of her inheritance? Our family name." Elara settled into her chair, her gaze steady, unblinking. She allowed a moment of silence to stretch, letting Marcus's panic simmer. Then, she spoke, her voice measured, almost clinical. "Your legacy, Marcus, was already at risk the moment you invited a viper into our home. Anya's future, as always, is my sole concern." She slid a slim, encrypted tablet across the table. "Before we discuss the terms of your inevitable downfall, perhaps you'd like to review some recent developments." Marcus eyed the tablet with trepidation. He picked it up, his fingers trembling. On the screen, a series of video clips began to play. The first was grainy, taken from a hidden camera, showing Lyra in a hotel room, laughing, carefully pouring a powder into Marcus's drink. He watched himself slump, unconscious. Then, the door opened, and two men, unfamiliar and predatory, entered the room, Lyra ushering them towards his inert form. Marcus gasped, his face paling, the color draining from it as if someone had pulled a plug. He saw his own unconscious face, then Lyra smiling, chatting with the men, before they began to manipulate him. The video, though not explicit in the most graphic sense, clearly depicted Lyra's sinister manipulation, her utter disregard for his safety and dignity, and the sheer malicious intent behind her actions. He dropped the tablet as if it had burned him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. No, that's impossible. Lyra, she wouldn't." His voice was barely a whisper, the self-pity, the delusion, finally shattering. "Oh, she would, Marcus." Elara's voice cut through his denial, sharp and cold. "She did. And it's not the only piece of evidence I possess. This, along with other health revelations." She paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air, watching his eyes widen with a horrifying realization. will ensure that any defense you might mount against Lyra's eventual prosecution for fraud and sexual assault will be utterly compromised. Not to mention, it makes for a rather compelling argument in our divorce proceedings. She then pushed a thick stack of documents across the table. It was a divorce agreement, unlike anything he could have ever imagined. His eyes darted across the pages, absorbing the brutal reality. She wasn't just asking for half. She was asking for everything. All of Thorne Industries, all its assets, all its intellectual property. And in return, you'll take on all the debts? He finally managed to croak, reading the clause that seemed impossibly to offer him a way out of the immediate financial abyss. You'll save me? A flicker of his old arrogance, his belief in her eternal devotion, resurfaced, even amidst the wreckage. Elara met his gaze, her eyes like chips of ice. I'm not saving you, Marcus. I'm stripping you bare. I'm simply choosing to dismantle your empire with a surgeon's precision, rather than letting it crash and burn in a spectacular, public inferno that might inadvertently scorch Anya. This way, you walk away with your life, if not your dignity or your fortune. You can even claim I saved your company, albeit under my complete ownership and management. A final, generous gesture from your too-perfect wife. Sign it, Marcus, or face the full, unexpurgated truth of your folly, your disease, and your partner's depravity, splashed across every headline. The choice, she made clear, was no choice at all. It was annihilation packaged as a mercy. The news of Marcus's complete capitulation, the forced transfer of assets, and the public humiliation had rippled through their small, interconnected world faster than Lyra Sterling could contain it. Her calls to Marcus went unanswered, or met with curt, defeated tones that spoke of a man utterly broken. Her imagined future of luxury, built on the ashes of Elara's marriage, had evaporated into thin air, leaving only the bitter tang of debt and a suddenly very public, very unflattering personal history. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through her. Elara had taken everything Marcus had, and in doing so had inadvertently stripped Lyra of her perceived victory, her leverage, her very identity. Lyra knew Elara's weakness, a chink in the impenetrable armor of her control. Anya. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of deceptively serene day that promised nothing but sunshine. Lyra, fueled by cheap vodka and a festering resentment, watched from her car as Anya skipped out of school, her pink princess backpack bouncing with each step. Lyra had seen Elara pick up Anya countless times, always with a snack, always with a smile. She knew Anya loved fruit, and she remembered Marcus, in a moment of drunken rambling, mentioning Anya's severe mango allergy. A cruel, calculated smile twisted Lyra's lips. Not fatal, she reasoned, just enough to scare Elara, to make her feel a fraction of the fear Lyra now lived with, to hit her where she lived. She approached Anya at the park a few blocks from the school, where children often lingered before parents arrived. Anya, darling? Lyra cooed, her voice sickly sweet, a stark contrast to the venom bubbling beneath. Anya, initially wary, recognized her as Daddy's friend. Lyra knelt, pulling a brightly colored plastic container from her bag. I made these special for you. Mango slices, just like in the cartoons. Your daddy told me you love them. Anya's eyes widened at the vibrant orange chunks. She hesitated, remembering Elara's firm warnings about accepting food from strangers. But Lyra's smile was so convincing, her eyes so warm. Just one, sweetie? As a secret, between us. Lyra pressed a juicy slice into Anya's small hand, her touch deliberately lingering. The child, trusting and innocent, took a small bite. Within minutes, Anya's skin began to prickle. A faint flush bloomed on her cheeks, quickly deepening to an angry crimson. Her throat tightened, and a wheezing gasp escaped her lips. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through Anya. She dropped the remaining mango, her eyes wide with terror as she clawed at her own neck. Lyra, watching from a distance, felt a flicker of something close to fear, quickly overshadowed by a perverse satisfaction. It was working. Elara would suffer. Elara arrived moments later, her heart seizing at the sight of Anya crumpled on the bench, struggling to breathe, her face grotesquely swollen. The discarded mango, a splash of vibrant orange on the pristine pavement, was all the explanation she needed. Every calculated move, every carefully constructed wall of calm, shattered in an instant. Her daughter, her innocent Anya, was in danger. A primal scream tore through Elara's mind, silent but deafening. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about survival, about protection. This was about a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. Shedding her carefully cultivated composure like a snake sheds its skin, Elara moved with the terrifying efficiency of a cornered predator. Her hands, usually so delicate as they sifted tea leaves, now became instruments of urgency. She ripped open Anya's princess backpack, her fingers fumbling only for a second before grasping the EpiPen. With a practiced, precise motion, she plunged the needle into Anya's thigh. "Hold on, my love. Just hold on," she whispered, her voice a ragged plea, her eyes scanning the park, searching for the monster who had dared to touch her child. She saw Lyra, a figure retreating too quickly, a flash of bright red scarf disappearing around the corner. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their sirens a wailing counterpoint to Elara's pounding heart. As Anya was stabilized and rushed to the hospital, Elara, standing amidst the chaos, made a call. Not to Marcus, not to a lawyer, but directly to her trusted network of private investigators and her most ruthless contacts in law enforcement. "Find Lyra Sterling," she commanded, her voice dangerously low, stripped of all emotion save for a terrifying, cold resolve. "And when you find her, do not hold back. Every single detail, every debt, every lie, every manipulation, every person she's wronged. I want it all exposed. I want her to lose everything and then some." The calmness that had once been Elara's greatest asset now became her most terrifying weapon. While Anya, thankfully, recovered swiftly at the hospital, Elara sat by her bedside, a silent sentinel of retribution. Her fingers flew across her tablet, not for business or legal documents, but for a meticulously crafted, devastating public dossier on Lyra Sterling. Her team, already primed by weeks of investigating Lyra's background for the divorce proceedings, now worked with an urgency bordering on fanaticism. They uncovered a history far darker and more intricate than even Elara had initially suspected. Multiple fraudulent loan applications, a pattern of preying on vulnerable, wealthy men, a network of shell corporations used for money laundering, and even a past arrest for petty theft that had been conveniently expunged. Before Lyra could even comprehend the full extent of Marcus's downfall, or the sheer magnitude of Elara's wrath, the first waves of the tsunami hit. Local news outlets, tipped off by an anonymous source, Elara, of course, began running stories about a mysterious woman linked to the recent high-profile corporate scandal involving Marcus Thorne. The stories, while initially vague, quickly escalated, fueled by an avalanche of leaked documents and anonymous testimonials. Lyra's carefully constructed facade of an aspiring socialite crumbled. Her landlord, alerted to her true financial state, initiated eviction proceedings. Her credit cards were frozen. Calls from angry creditors, once manageable, now became a relentless siege. Lyra, cornered and terrified, finally made the desperate mistake of trying to flee. She was apprehended at the airport, her passport flagged, not just for the assault on Anya, but for a newly issued warrant for financial fraud. The police, acting on Elara's relentless data dump, presented Lyra with an insurmountable wall of evidence. The attempt to harm Anya, though not fatal, was now framed as an act of calculated, malicious intent, elevated by her history of manipulation and deceit. Elara had ensured that Lyra's motive would be painted not as desperate revenge, but as a cruel, premeditated act against an innocent child. The public outcry was immediate and visceral. Parents everywhere rallied behind Anya and Elara, condemning Lyra's actions. Every detail of Lyra's sordid past, every fabricated claim, every instance of her callous disregard for others, was laid bare for the world to see. Elara had not just sought justice. She had orchestrated an annihilation. Lyra Sterling became a pariah, her name synonymous with venom and deceit. There would be no escape, no rehabilitation, no quiet disappearance. Elara had ensured that every corner of Lyra's existence, past, present, and future, would be stained by the ruin she had wrought upon herself. Her daughter was safe, and for Elara, that was the only currency that mattered. All other debts would be paid in full and with interest. The dust of Lyra Sterling's public downfall settled not with a bang, but with the quiet, methodical precision of legal documents being signed. Elara Vance sat across from her attorney, a woman whose sharp eyes and even sharper mind mirrored her own. Full custody of Anya was granted without contest. Marcus, reeling from the twin blows of his company's implosion and Lyra's treachery, had barely put up a fight. His lawyers, once formidable, now seemed to crumble under the weight of Elara's meticulously compiled evidence. The tea factory, once a symbol of her quiet, domestic ambition, was now solely hers, free and clear, salvaged from the wreckage of Thorne Industries' debts. The initial days were a blur of logistics. Elara moved Anya into a new home, smaller than the grand house she'd shared with Marcus, but filled with a warmth and security that had been missing for too long. Anya, though still carrying a quiet sadness, began to unfurl like a delicate blossom. Her princess backpack, once a silent shield, now became an accessory to joyful adventures in their new, sunlit garden. Elara watched her, a fierce, protective love burning in her chest, the embers of vengeance having cooled into a steady, determined flame. Her focus shifted entirely from dismantling the past to meticulously building a future. Her tea factory, Vance Teas, became her canvas. The previous years of managing it as a secondary concern, Marcus's patronizing hand ever present, had stifled its true potential. Now Elara unleashed her vision. She pored over market research, delved into new organic sourcing, and experimented with innovative blends. The first few months were grueling. Suppliers, wary of the Thorne scandal, needed convincing. Old debts from Marcus's mismanagement needed to be restructured. Elara worked tirelessly, her elegant hands, once adorned with diamonds, now stained with tea leaves and ink. She navigated the complex world of business financing with the same calm, strategic mind that had dismantled her marriage. She hired a team of passionate, young professionals, inspiring them with her quiet resolve and unwavering belief in her product. There was a new Earl Grey blend, infused with a subtle hint of lavender, that became an instant bestseller. A detoxifying green tea, sourced from sustainable farms in the Highlands, garnered rave reviews from health bloggers. Elara personally oversaw every aspect, from the packaging design, elegant, minimalist, reflecting her own refined taste, to the intricate supply chain. She initiated direct-to-consumer online sales, leveraging digital marketing with surprising savviness. Her brand began to grow, slowly at first, then with an accelerating momentum. Vance Teas wasn't just a business. It was a testament to resilience, a symbol of quiet strength, attracting a loyal clientele who appreciated its authenticity and quality. The scent of fresh tea leaves, once a comfort, was now the intoxicating aroma of her burgeoning empire. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne's world had become a desolate wasteland. Thorne Industries, once a beacon of his ambition, had been swallowed whole by its crushing debts. The final offer Elara had presented him, his entire business in exchange for her absorbing its monumental liabilities, had seemed like a lifeline, a humiliating but necessary escape. He'd signed, believing he could always rebuild, always charm his way back. He was wrong. The public scandal, fueled by the exposure of his financial improprieties and Lyra's malicious video, had utterly decimated his reputation. Banks refused him credit. Old associates, fearing contamination, turned a cold shoulder. His once bustling office sat empty, the polished mahogany gathering dust, a tombstone for his hubris. His grand house, the one Elara had meticulously decorated, was foreclosed. Marcus found himself living in a cramped, rented apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place he would have once deemed beneath his stable boy. The tailored suits were replaced by ill-fitting, wrinkled clothes. the expensive whiskey by cheap beer. His once handsome face, now hollowed by stress and self-pity, was often unshaven, his eyes perpetually shadowed. He attempted to start new ventures, half-hearted at best, but the stench of his past clung to him like a shroud. Every door he knocked on remained firmly shut. His charisma, once his most potent weapon, now felt like a hollow echo in empty rooms. He was a man stripped bare, his identity, so tied to his wealth and status, evaporated. Sometimes, consumed by a gnawing emptiness and a desperate need to grasp at the remnants of his former life, Marcus would drive. He'd park his dilapidated sedan a few blocks away from Anya's new school, or near the vibrant, bustling storefront of Vance Tees. He would watch. He saw Anya, laughing, her hand clasped securely in Elara's. He saw Elara, poised and elegant, walking with a newfound confidence, occasionally stopping to greet a customer or a business partner, her movements purposeful and assured, her eyes, once veiled with a quiet sadness he'd misinterpreted as submission, now shone with an inner light he had never truly seen. He saw the subtle changes, the way she held her head higher, the effortless smile that reached her eyes, devoid of the forced sweetness he'd grown accustomed to. He would remember her initial accusation, delivered in that calm, steady voice that had always unnerved him. "You were too perfect, Elara," he'd scoffed, a convenient excuse for his own failings. Now, watching her, he understood. She hadn't been perfect. She had been strategic. She had been patient. And he, in his arrogance, had mistaken her quiet strength for weakness, her forbearance for ignorance. The woman before him was not the wife he had taken for granted. She was the architect of his ruin, precisely because he had underestimated the keen mind behind those observant eyes. Anya, a few months later, asked about her father. They were sitting in Elara's new, sun-drenched study, Anya drawing a colorful picture of a family of three, her, Elara, and their little cat, Machi. "Will Daddy ever come back to live with us, Mama?" she asked, her voice small. Elara paused, her hand gently tracing Anya's hair. "Daddy lives in a different home now, my love," she said, her voice soft but firm, devoid of anger or bitterness. "He's making his own choices, but you and I, we have our home, our safe, happy home, and nothing will ever change that." She met Anya's gaze, offering reassurance, not resentment. There was no need for venom. The deed was done, the ledger balanced. Years passed. Vance Tees blossomed into a national brand, synonymous with quality and ethical sourcing. Elara, a respected figure in the business world, was often invited to speak at conferences, her story of resilience a quiet inspiration. She had built a life not just of success, but of profound meaning. Her mornings began with Anya's cheerful chatter, her days filled with the challenges and triumphs of her thriving enterprise, her evenings spent in the warm embrace of their shared life. Marcus Thorne, a forgotten specter of a man, occasionally reappeared in the tabloids for some minor infraction or a desperate, ill-fated attempt to regain relevance. Each time, his image was a stark contrast to Elara's elegant, confident demeanor. He was a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the corridors of his own past failures. His health, once robust, began to falter, a physical manifestation of his internal decay. He had sought fleeting pleasures, then lost everything of true value. On a crisp autumn day, Elara stood by the window of her factory office, overlooking the bustling production line. The aroma of freshly brewed tea filled the air. Anya, now a bright, inquisitive teenager, was down on the floor, excitedly explaining a new social media campaign idea to one of the marketing interns. Elara smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached the depths of her sharp, knowing eyes. She had sought justice, yes, but she had found so much more. She had found herself, forged in the crucible of betrayal and rebuilt with unwavering purpose. Her life, once controlled by the illusion of partnership, was now truly her own, a masterpiece of quiet strength, resilience, and unyielding love for her daughter. The architect of ruin, indeed, but not of hers.